The HOA died years ago, so why was she enforcing rules from the grave? The day HOA Karen came storming back into Quiet Valley, I knew trouble had finally found its way home. Fresh out of prison, she marched up my road, declaring she still ran the HOA. Never mind that it was dissolved and I legally owned everything it left behind. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just arrogance. Someone had armed her with a lie big enough to start a war. If you want to ride with me through every twist of this mess, hit subscribe and stick around. Because justice out here moves quiet, but it hits hard. Bethany Crowell didn't return to Quiet Valley quietly. I heard her before I saw her. A voice like rusted metal scraping across a rock face, barking orders at an empty road, as if someone had been waiting all these years for her command. Then the black Dowkey transport SUV rolled past the cottonwoods and onto the gravel lane that led straight toward my ranch. Dust lifted behind it in a broken ribbon, catching pieces of the morning light as the vehicle slowed to a stop. She stepped out like she'd never left, chin high, spine rigid, eyes carved from the same cold granite as the ridge that overlooked the valley. And just like that, the air shifted. Folks around here had spent 3 years learning how to breathe again. But seeing her standing there, as if the years behind bars were just an inconvenience in her schedule, pulled every old bruise back to the surface. I stayed seated on the porch, one boot braced on the step, coffee cooling in my hand. No need to move yet. No need to say a word. She'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had, and Bethany always preferred to speak first. "Mr. Carter?" she called out, voice sharpened to cut at distance. "You and I have unfinished business." I studied her without letting the stare turn into a challenge. She wore county-issue khakis, a decent blouse someone must have loaned her, and an ankle monitor blinking a soft, steady warning. The thing looked like a live wire strapped around her leg. But what caught my eye was the folder tucked under her arm, thin, worn, but held with the confidence of someone carrying authority. Authority she no longer had. "Didn't expect you back this quick," I said, keeping my tone even. "Thought release hearings would drag out a little longer." Her smile barely twitched. "Good behavior," she answered, "and an obligation to restore order to this community." Her gaze traveled across my fences, the gravel road, the old barn with a fresh coat of stain, then back to me. "This ranch has several pending violations I'll need to address today." I let those words hang, not because they surprised me, but because they were so wildly out of place they practically echoed. The HOA had dissolved, legally, publicly, and permanently, after her conviction. The board fell apart. The community threw out the rule books. Folks planted whatever they wanted, parked wherever they wanted, painted their mailboxes the colors that made them happy for the first time in years. She knew that. She had to. "Bethany," I said quietly, "there is no HOA anymore." She didn't blink. "It was improperly dissolved. Your filings were fraudulent. My office still stands, and I am resuming authority effective immediately." My grip tightened around the mug. Not anger, just calculation. That was her opening play. A confident lie delivered like a legal fact. Except the office she mentioned had been shuttered by county order. The bylaws she referenced had been voided. And the only thing left with her name on it was a sentencing document and the terms of her release. "You're trespassing," I answered. "This is private property." Her jaw hardened. The ankle monitor blinked faster, almost like it sensed the friction building between us. She took one step onto the first board of my wooden walkway. That crossing line, the one she'd used to intimidate half the valley for years, looked different now. She used to walk it like a queen returning to her balcony. Now she stepped across it with the jittery righteousness of someone desperate to reclaim something that no longer existed. "You'll comply with inspection procedures," she said. "You were notified." "No," I said. "I wasn't." The wind shifted through the pines behind me. Nothing dramatic. Just a breath of the land, reminding both of us who it really belonged to. Bethany didn't look at the trees. She didn't look at the fences or the barn or the hills that cradled this valley. She looked only at me, as if the world existed in a straight line between her need for control and the person she believed had stolen it from her. "You can't ignore this," she snapped. "You can't ignore me." "I've been doing just that for 3 years," I said. A muscle flickered beneath her cheek. She wasn't used to being contradicted, especially not by the man who'd fought her the hardest during her reign. The folder under her arm sagged slightly as she adjusted her grip, and a loose sheet slipped forward enough for me to catch the heading. Quiet Valley Homeowner Association. Revocation of non-compliant structures. I felt tension rise through the back of my shoulders. Not panic, not fear, just awareness. She had paperwork. Old paperwork, probably. But the fact that she brought it with her that meant someone had fed her a narrative strong enough to survive prison walls. Someone had given her a reason to believe she still had power. The monitor chirped again. She ignored it, or didn't hear it. Hard to tell. "You'll see me again today," she said, turning away with stiff, practiced steps. "You've let this place fall below standard for long enough." She walked back toward the SUV with the posture of a woman returning to an office she no longer possessed. The deputy inside didn't get out, just watched her, eyes narrowed, one hand resting on the steering wheel. He looked tired, like he'd been driving her around all morning while she demanded stops in places where her past still had teeth. The door shut behind her. The SUV rolled backward, slow and heavy, until it disappeared behind the cottonwoods. I set the coffee cup down. 3 years I had prepared for this storm. What I wasn't prepared for was how confident she looked marching back into a kingdom that burned down without her noticing. The question rose in my mind, with the clarity of a warning bell. If she believed the HOA still existed, who had convinced her it did? The question followed me all morning, like a shadow that didn't match my steps. By the time I finished tightening the hinge on the east gate and checking the warning signs along the perimeter, the valley had gone strangely quiet. Not peaceful, more like the quiet before someone lights a fuse. At 10:17, the fuse lit. Bethany reappeared on my ranch road without the SUV that brought her earlier. She'd walked this time. Her stride was faster, sharper, driven by something newly urgent. The ankle monitor blinked in quick pulses, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. She carried the same folder, but now it had extra papers stuffed into it. Loose sheets marked with old HOA headers and highlighted text. She didn't bother calling out. She stepped past my property line without slowing. My phone buzzed. Security cam alert. Unauthorized entry, gate 1. No surprise there. I met her halfway down the drive. "You're crossing into restricted land," I said. "Turn back." She stopped only because she had to. I could see the defiance building in her posture. Shoulders rigid, chin set, eyes narrow and burning with misplaced conviction. "I warned you earlier," she snapped. "The barn, fencing, and signage all fall under HOA structural compliance. I am performing a mandatory inspection." She flipped open her folder. "This notice was issued 3 years ago and remains active." "That's obsolete," I answered. "The HOA was legally dissolved." She leaned in like she could cut me with the edge of the printed page. "Not according to this." She held up a document bearing the HOA seal, an outdated form, last revised a decade ago, half the text smudged. But the signature line at the bottom was what mattered. She'd signed it back when she still held office. It had no authority now, but the way she gripped it told me someone had convinced her otherwise. Before I could speak, the ankle monitor shrieked, a harsh electronic warning that echoed off the fences. She didn't flinch. "You hear that?" I asked. "You're violating the terms of your release." "My parole officer will understand," she said. "This is official community business." No, it's trespassing. The road gravel crackled behind her as a sheriff's cruiser rolled in, quiet but certain. Sheriff Morales stepped out, thumb hooked on his belt, eyes already reading the situation. He and I had survived years of her nonsense together. He didn't need an explanation. "Miss Crowell," he said, "you're out of bounds. Step back behind the property line." Bethany turned on him with a glare sharp enough to make a weaker Timo take a step back. Morales didn't move. "This is HOA jurisdiction," she said. "I have full authority to inspect structures and enforce compliance." "Your HOA doesn't exist anymore," he said, calm as a lake at dawn. "And even if it did, you lost your position when you were convicted." "That conviction," she spat, "was manufactured by people who didn't want order in this valley." Morales didn't blink. "Doesn't matter. Step back now." She pressed the toe of her shoe deeper into the dirt, like she was planting a flag. "No. The HOA bylaws allow emergency override when community safety is compromised. And this property," she pointed at my barn, "is compromised." It was a barn. A sturdy one. Newly reinforced beams, fresh roof perfectly within county code. Still, she acted like its existence alone was an act of aggression. Morales exhaled. Not frustrated, just preparing for the slow, inevitable process of dealing with someone whose reality didn't match the rest of the world. "Miss Crowell, if you don't step back, the monitor will alert the parole office and they will intervene." "It already did," I said. Her jaw twitched, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she rifled through her papers, pulling out a second sheet, this one printed on newer paper, not smudged, not old. "Where did you get that?" I asked. She held it tightly, not letting the wind catch a corner. "A community consultant provided updated documentation. The HOA was improperly dissolved. Therefore, my authority is still valid." A consultant. There it was. The invisible hand behind her confidence. Someone fed her enough legal half-truths to make her believe she had a foothold. Someone who wanted her stirring chaos in a valley that had finally quieted. Morales took a slow step closer. "Miss Crowell, who gave you that document?" She didn't answer. Instead, she clutched it to her chest like it was scripture. "You'll both see soon enough," she said. "People are waiting for my leadership." Then she turned, not away, but deeper onto my land. That was her mistake. The ankle monitor emitted a piercing alarm. A voice came through the device, tinny, stern, unmistakable. "Miss Crowell, you are outside your approved perimeter. Return to authorized location immediately." She froze. For 1 second, I thought she might actually obey. Instead, she pivoted toward my barn, took 3 more steps into my property, and lifted her phone like she was documenting violations. "Structural hazard," she muttered. "Non-compliant fencing." Another picture. "Illegal signage." She wasn't speaking to me. She was narrating into her phone for whoever had convinced her she still mattered. Morales spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, we've got a code 43. Parole breach in progress." "Copy. Mobile unit en route." The reply was instant. Bethany kept snapping photos. Her voice sharpened with determination, but underneath it, I heard something else. Fear, twisted into self-righteousness. "Miss Crowell," Morales warned, "put the phone down and return to the road." She spun around. "No, he's hiding violations. He always has. And now that I'm back, he won't get away with it." "What violations?" Morales asked. "All of them," she shouted. And that's when I understood. She wasn't here to inspect anything. She wasn't here to enforce anything. She was here because someone convinced her I was the reason she went to prison. Her anger wasn't random. It was targeted. The cruiser from the parole unit arrived then, silent, fast, precise. 2 officers stepped out, exchanging looks with Morales before approaching Bethany. "Miss Crowell," one said, "you need to come with us until your supervising officer reviews this breach." Bethany hugged her folder tighter. No, I have work to do. Community work. The officer held out a hand. We're not asking. She hesitated, breathing fast. Her gaze flicked from me to Morales to the officers, then back to my barn, like she was trying to decide who the enemy really was. But the decision didn't matter. Her monitor made it for her. Ma'am, the officer said again, firmer. Now. Finally, she surrendered the phone. She didn't fight, didn't shout. She just stared at me, eyes burning with the kind of resentment that doesn't disappear. It calcifies. This isn't over, she whispered. The officers escorted her to the vehicle. The door shut with a final metallic thud. I stood still until the cruiser disappeared down the road, its taillights fading beyond the bend. Morales stayed beside me, hands on his hips. What's your read on that? He asked quietly. She didn't come back with just anger, I said. She came back with instructions. Morales nodded once. Then someone's playing a deeper game. And he was right, because her confidence didn't come from memory or authority. It came from someone whispering in her ear. Someone who wanted her aimed at me. Someone who stood to gain if she tore this valley apart again. The first violation wasn't her stepping onto my land. It was someone giving her the power to believe she still controlled it. By the next morning, the valley felt different. Tight, watchful, unsettled. You could sense it in the way neighbors lingered on porches, in how cars slowed near intersections, in the silence that stretched longer than normal between ranch dogs barking. Everyone had heard she was back. Everyone knew trouble had just been reawakened. At 8:42 a.m., trouble arrived in the form of a printed citation shoved under my gate latch. HOA notice of non-compliance. Urgent structural review. Pending demolition issued by President B. Crowell. The ink wasn't even dry. Before I could pick it up, my phone buzzed. 3 messages in a row. Sarah. Just got a notice pinned to my mailbox. She's back at it? Patterson. She said my hydrangeas violate frontage uniformity. Hydrangeas! Davis. She filmed my kids' bikes. What does that even mean? I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because the sound that rolled up the valley a minute later said everything. Bethany's voice carrying down the road like a bullhorn, barking out instructions no one asked for. I stepped onto the porch and watched her move house to house, clipboard in one hand, ancient HOA binders in the other. Her ankle monitor blinked, but she didn't slow. She snapped pictures of mailboxes, fences, porch chairs, anything she could twist into a violation. When she reached the Johnsons' place, she slammed a notice onto their door so hard it fluttered off the hinge. You were warned about the black paint, she hissed. Mrs. Johnson appeared in the doorway. That was 3 years ago, Bethany, and the HOA is gone. Bethany leaned in, too close. Rules don't disappear just because weak people got tired of following them. Mrs. Johnson flinched. The valley had seen that look before. Fear layered under exhausted anger. It was the same look that defined the dark years under Bethany's authority. I headed down the driveway. Bethany, I called out. You're harassing people. She whirled around. I am enforcing standards. This valley has slipped into chaos while I was gone. She gestured at the road as if she were pointing at ruin. Non-approved mailboxes, unregistered structures, fencing that violates height codes. And your barn? There is no HOA, I said. There is, she snapped. It was never properly dissolved. The way she said it told me she fully believed it, and belief made her dangerous. Behind me, several neighbors gathered in a loose semicircle, curious, anxious, but unwilling to get too close. People who once trembled at the sight of her clipboard now stood frozen, waiting for this new version of a familiar nightmare to escalate. What you're doing is illegal, I said. Issuing notices, filming private property. She cut me off. You think prison erased my authority? You think 3 years changes the law? Her voice rose. The filings were incomplete. The dissolution wasn't valid, which means every violation still stands. Who told you that? I asked. Her grip tightened on the clipboard. A consultant who understands the law better than you do. A consultant. Someone feeding her this script. Someone who needed confusion, chaos, conflict. Someone who saw advantage in her delusion. She lifted her phone again and began recording me. This property owner, she said into the camera, continues to violate structural codes and has refused cease and comply orders issued prior to my incarceration. I stepped closer, making sure my voice stayed calm. You're lying to that camera, and you know it. Her expression flickered, something wounded, something furious, but she swallowed it down and raised her chin. Your barn exceeds allowable height. Your signage is unauthorized. Your perimeter fence is non-standard. Then she added, and you will be fined. The camera caught my smile. By who? Her silence lasted 1 beat too long. By the HOA, she said finally. By me. The wind shifted. Somewhere behind us, a screen door slammed. Another message vibrated my phone. Patterson. She just put a violation on my garden gnomes. Again. I kept my eyes on Bethany. This community doesn't answer to you anymore. They will, she whispered. And then she moved on, marching toward another house, her monitor chirping warnings she refused to acknowledge. She placed citations on doors, fences, mailboxes, each one an echo of a power she no longer possessed. Every door she touched made the valley hold its breath a little tighter. I followed at a distance, documenting everything. My phone recorded her movements. My cameras caught her trespassing on multiple properties. She saw me filming but didn't care. You're trying to stop me, she said without turning around. But I've seen the paperwork. The dissolution was fraudulent. This community still belongs to the HOA. I felt the shift then, not in her voice but in the certainty underneath it. Someone had given her paperwork, and she believed it. At the Patterson house, she pinned a notice so violently the thumbtack snapped. She rummaged for another one, muttering orders to imaginary board members. Then she pivoted to the Patterson mailbox and pointed with fury. Unauthorized color! Non-regulation texture! I heard Mrs. Patterson whisper behind me, trembling. I can't do this again. I stepped between them, blocking Bethany's path. That's enough, I said. She snapped her head up. For the first time, I saw more than anger behind her eyes. I saw desperation. I'm rebuilding this community, she insisted. This valley needs structure, needs someone to enforce standards. She jabbed a finger into the air. And you are the reason everything fell apart. There it was, the real target. Bethany, I said evenly, you lost your authority when the HOA died. It didn't die, she screamed. Her voice cracked the quiet like a branch under weight. It was murdered, she added, and I know who did it. She stared at me long enough that the neighbors began backing away. You'll be hearing from me again today, she said. She marched off toward the end of the road, stuffing citations into mailboxes, like she was sowing poison into the soil. Once she was out of earshot, Sheriff Morales pulled up in his cruiser, having followed the trail of complaints spreading across the valley. You see all this? He asked. I'm documenting everything. She's building a case in her head, he said. A fake one, but someone gave her just enough paperwork to think it's real. I nodded. She's convinced she still runs this place. Morales looked down the road, watching her small figure grow smaller, but no less dangerous. Delusion backed by documents, he said quietly. That's not simple trouble. That's orchestrated. And he was right. The valley wasn't facing the Bethany who once terrorized us with rulings and citations. We were facing a weapon someone else had reloaded. And the question wasn't whether she would escalate. It was how far she'd go before the next detonation. The answer came at 3:08 a.m., and it came in red. My security system pinged first. Motion alert near the barn, followed by the unmistakable hiss of aerosol paint cutting the night air. I rolled out of bed, grabbed the tablet from the nightstand, and pulled up the live feed. There she was. Bethany Crowell, ankle monitor blinking like a dying signal tower, creeping across my gravel drive with a can of spray paint in one hand and her phone in the other. She aimed the camera at my barn, whispering into it, like she was narrating a documentary only she understood. "Evidence of structural decay," she murmured. "Hazardous, non-compliant, requires immediate demolition." Then she raised the paint can. The screen filled with red strokes, aggressive, messy, unhinged, until she'd scrawled a giant message across the barn door. "Condemned by HOA, demolition order." I grabbed my boots, but I didn't go outside. Not yet. I let the cameras roll. Let the timestamps burn themselves into the evidence logs. Let her document her own violation. She filmed the graffiti like she was proud of it, stepping back to inspect her work. "You've ignored warnings," she said into her phone. "This structure is unsafe." She was building a case that didn't exist, one she believed someone would see, someone she believed would back her. At 3:13 a.m., her ankle monitor shrieked. She flinched, but kept filming. At 3:16, headlights crested the hill, the parole unit. Their vehicle rolled up fast, gravel spraying out from under the tires. 2 officers stepped out, moving with the urgency of men who'd been tracking her location all night. "Miss Crowell," one shouted. "Stop what you're doing! Hands visible!" She froze. The paint can clattered to the ground, rolling until it bumped her foot. She looked at it like the betrayal came from the can, not her actions. "This isn't criminal," she said. "This is community enforcement." The officers didn't argue. They had procedures to follow. They secured her phone, lifted the can from the dirt, and took pictures of the graffiti themselves. I stepped out then, boots crunching on gravel. The barn door glowed red under the porch lights. The sentence she'd written, crooked and furious, shouted across the valley even in the darkness. She looked up at me. "This is your fault," she hissed. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Every camera angle captured the truth. One officer approached me. "Mr. Carter, your system caught all this?" "Every second," I said. He nodded. "We'll want copies." Bethany's posture stiffened, indignation swelling in her like a storm. "You're all blind," she snarled. "This valley needs order, needs structure, needs me." "You need to stop talking," the officer said calmly. She ignored him. "The HOA bylaws allow emergency action when structures are deemed unsafe. I reviewed the records. I checked the files. This barn violates multiple." "There are no bylaws," I said. "Not anymore." Her face twisted in something half rage, half disbelief. "That dissolution wasn't valid," she insisted. "I've seen the documents. The filings were incomplete. Someone tampered with the records." She looked right at me when she said it. Someone who benefited from the HOA falling apart. And there it was again. The invisible hand behind her delusion, feeding her lines, feeding her purpose, feeding her the belief that she still held power here. The officers began guiding her toward their vehicle. She jerked away. "You're arresting the wrong person," she shouted at the valley. "You'll see. When the truth comes out, you'll all answer for ignoring my authority." "Miss Crowell," one officer said firmly, "you are in violation of your release terms. This is not optional." Her monitor announced another violation. A robotic voice ordered her to return to her authorized zone. She didn't comply. The officers gently secured her wrists, not with force, just procedure, and placed her in the back seat. The valley had awakened by then. Lights flicked on in distant windows. A few residents stepped outside, confused, tired, nervous. Mrs. Patterson clutched her robe at the end of her walkway. The Johnsons stood together on their porch, arms wrapped around each other. Everyone watched the red graffiti. Everyone saw the officers. Everyone heard the echo of something they hoped they'd never feel again. Fear. Old fear. Fear of the woman who once controlled their lives. But this time, the fear carried something else too. Anger. Not loud. Not violent. Cold. Focused. The kind that grows in people who've had enough. Sheriff Morales arrived last, driving slowly, reading the scene before stepping out. He approached the barn, studying the message with a long exhale. "She's escalating," he said. "She's being pushed," I corrected. He gave me a look, one that said he already suspected the same. "Someone gave her paperwork," I added. "Legit-looking paperwork. Enough to make her think she still runs this valley." Morales nodded once. "We'll get into it." As the officers prepared to transport her, Bethany pressed her forehead against the window glass, eyes burning with fury. "You can't erase the HOA," she whispered, loud enough for only me and the sheriff to hear. "You can't erase me." Then the car pulled away, taillights disappearing into the dark. Silence followed, but not the kind that soothed. This one weighed on the valley, a quiet loaded with the knowledge that we hadn't seen the worst of her yet. Behind me, the barn door dripped red. Evidence of a mind unraveling. Evidence of someone convinced she had a mission. Evidence that what came next wouldn't be small. I snapped photos, logged them, and stored the security footage in a protected drive. Every detail mattered. Every timestamp. Every angle. Morales turned to me. "She believes the HOA still exists. She believes she's still president. And she believes you're the one who destroyed her life." "She's wrong on all three," I said. He stared at the barn again. "Doesn't matter. Someone made her believe she's right." The wind picked up through the valley then. Not dramatic. Just enough to rustle the dried brush near the barn. It carried the sharp scent of spray paint, the metallic edge of chaos. And something else. The quiet promise that things were about to get much, much worse. By sunrise, the valley buzzed like a disturbed hive. Folks weren't talking in full sentences. Just fragments whispered over fences and through half-open doors. Red paint. Middle of the night. They said the monitor went off 3 different times. She kept saying the HOA wasn't dead. Fear mixed with something sharper. Anger. The kind that comes from being pushed back toward a past you already escaped. I documented the graffiti, logged the footage, backed everything onto 3 separate drives. Then I called Sarah Whitfield. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're calling about breakfast and not what I think you're calling about." "No breakfast," I said. She struck again. A sigh. "All right, I'll come over." 20 minutes later, Sarah's Jeep bounced up my drive. She stepped out holding a leather satchel and a thermos, looking like she was ready for either a legal deposition or a wildfire. "I heard," she said, nodding toward the barn. She didn't exactly hide her work. "She thinks she's rebuilding the HOA," I answered. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Impossible. The dissolution was airtight." "That's what I thought, but someone gave her paperwork. Something clean. Newer than anything she should have access to." Sarah didn't waste time. "Show me." We headed into the storage shed behind my workshop, where I kept the old HOA archives boxed and labeled, documents I'd kept mostly out of necessity. Evidence from the battles we fought years before. Dust clung to everything like a film of old resentment. Sarah snapped on gloves. "Let's see what was in the original dissolution." We pulled box after box onto the workbench. Bylaws, amendments, violation logs, the entire paper skeleton of an organization that once nearly strangled this valley. She flipped through the final year binders, brow furrowed. Here, these are the dissolution filings. You submitted them, the board signed them, and the county processed them. Everything is here. But something felt wrong. Check the affidavit page, I said. She turned to it slowly. Her eyes narrowed. Where is it? The board's affidavit, an official statement required for dissolving the HOA, was missing. The section where it should have been was just a faint impression of dust. Not torn out, not misplaced, removed. Someone came in here, Sarah whispered. Someone who knew exactly what to take. We checked the next binder. The same page was gone. And the next. Always the affidavit. Always the same surgical absence. This wasn't random, she said. This was intentional. Someone wanted to create doubt about the dissolution. I leaned against the bench, the weight of it settling on my shoulders. Bethany said the dissolution was fraudulent, I said, that the paperwork was incomplete. Sarah froze mid-page. Jake, if someone showed her documentation missing the affidavit, they could convince her the HOA was never legally killed. And the valley would be right back under her thumb, I said. She exhaled sharply. But who? Who benefits from resurrecting a dead HOA? Her phone buzzed then. Do not disturb overridden by a flagged contact. She answered, listened, then put it on speaker. Sarah? It was Patterson, voice quivering. She just came back to my house with someone else. Someone else? Sarah repeated. A man. Tall, gray jacket, clipboard. He wouldn't give his name. He said he was a consultant to the board. The board. Sarah, what board? There is no board. Sarah shot me a look. Stay inside, she told Patterson. Lock the door. We're handling it. The call ended. Sarah blew out a breath. A consultant. That has to be the one feeding her this garbage. I nodded. Someone with access to legal documents. Someone who knows how to create just enough confusion to make her think she still has control. And someone who wants something, she said. People don't resurrect HOAs for fun. I opened the last binder. When I saw the top page, a chill ran down my spine. Sarah, I said quietly, you need to see this. It was an HOA ledger, property assets listed in meticulous lines, but several entries had been highlighted, then circled in red pen. Former common area parcel, 11B. Easement parcel 7C, utility lot. Parcel 15A, right-of-way access. Someone had marked the parcels that controlled access roads, buildable land, and every leftover fragment the HOA once owned. Sarah inhaled. The HOA parcels, were they ever auctioned? I asked. Her voice thinned. Yes, during dissolution. Some went to adjacent property owners, some went to the county. But the red circles weren't done. Because below them, written in a shaky, desperate scrawl, was a note. Where did they go? Who took them? Sarah's face paled. She thinks someone stole HOA property. Someone made her think that, I corrected. We exchanged a look. Only one name fit this pattern. Someone with money, influence, and an interest in land acquisition. Marcus, she whispered. Marcus Hale, developer, opportunist, and the man who once tried to buy half the valley through backdoor pressure. When the HOA collapsed, he vanished. Rumor said he'd moved operations to a different county. Apparently not far enough. Sarah rubbed her temples. If he convinced her that the HOA wasn't properly dissolved, she could become the legal battering ram he needs. She'd cause chaos while he maneuvers behind the scenes. And she'd think she was the hero, I said. Footsteps crunched outside the shed. We turned. It was Davis, wide-eyed, holding a stack of papers. "She gave me these," he said, "this morning. Said it was mandatory compliance. You need to see them." He handed the papers over. Sarah scanned them first. Her eyebrows shot up. "These are new," she said. "Different font, different format. Someone drafted these recently." "And the signature?" I asked. She pointed. It was Bethany's. But not 3 years ago, Bethany. Fresh ink, fresh signature, fresh manipulation. Davis swallowed. "She said if I didn't comply, she'd issue fines." "There are no fines," I said. He nodded slowly. "But she believes there are." Sarah closed the folder. "This is coordinated. Someone is using her. And if we don't act fast, this valley will see the worst of her all over again." I looked at the shed filled with old paper, records of battles we'd fought and thought we'd buried. But ghosts don't stay buried when someone digs them up. "What do we do?" Davis asked. I didn't hesitate. "We gather evidence. All of it. Every missing page. Every forged document. Every action she takes. Then we find whoever is feeding her this." Sarah zipped her satchel. "And when we do, we shut them both down," I said, "and make sure this valley never falls under HOA rule again." Outside, the valley was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that warned you the next move had already begun. And this time it wouldn't be red paint. It would be something far more dangerous. Paperwork. By Monday morning, every house in Quiet Valley felt the shift. Folks weren't just scared now. They were bracing, waiting for the next knock, the next accusation, the next time Bethany came down their driveway, waving her clipboard like a badge of authority carved from thin air. And she didn't disappoint. At 8:12 a.m., her voice echoed across the ridge again. "Mandatory HOA inspection. Residents must comply with regulatory review." I stepped onto my porch just in time to see her marching toward the Miller's home, ankle monitor chirping with each violation of her restricted boundary, clipboard clutched to her chest like a holy book. Sarah joined me at the railing. "She's spiraling. Spiraling with direction," I answered. Somebody wound her up and pointed her right at us. Bethany jabbed her pen against the Miller's siding, scolding them for improper paint sheen. They weren't even outside. She was lecturing the wall. Then her real target came into view, my tenants. Davis stepped out of his place across the pasture, holding coffee like he wasn't sure whether to drink it or use it as a shield. She spotted him instantly. "You!" she shouted, storming toward him. "You failed to submit your residency documents. Your mailbox labeling is non-compliant, and this porch lamp is a Category 4 violation." Davis blinked. "Ma'am, none of that is real." "It's all real," she snapped. "The HOA never dissolved. You're part of an illegal occupation." Sarah tensed beside me. "She's escalating fast." "Too fast," I said. "Someone coached her." Neighbors began filtering from doorways. Some recording, some whispering, everyone watching. Trauma has a way of leaving a mark that never fully fades, and seeing Bethany back in tyrant mode was dragging old wounds straight to the surface. Mrs. Patterson clutched her robe like armor. Hawkins leaned on his cane, jaw clenched tight. Even the kids, who never lived under Bethany, stood behind parents, sensing danger without understanding it. Then Bethany turned, straight toward me. "That barn demolition was only the beginning," she yelled. "I am restoring order to Quiet Valley." "And you're violating bail again," I said, stepping down from the porch. Her jaw tightened, but her eyes flickered. Fear, then denial, then something stranger. Conviction. She believed what she was saying. That made her twice as dangerous. "You stole HOA property," she insisted. "Transferred deeds illegally, manipulated filings. I have evidence." She slapped a stack of papers against her clipboard. Freshly printed. Clean format. Legal jargon. The kind of thing Marcus Hale would produce if he wanted to resurrect a corpse with paperwork. "Show me," I said. She hugged the documents to her chest. "You're not authorized. Only board members may review internal records." "There is no board," I said. "You dissolved it." Her face twisted like I'd struck her. "That's a lie. A complete fabrication." Her ankle monitor beeped again, shrill, insistent, furious. Deputy Lawson's cruiser angled into the drive within seconds. They were monitoring her distance in real time now. "Ms. Crowell," Lawson said calmly, stepping out. "You need to step off Carter property." "I am the authority here," she barked. "You're a parolee," Lawson corrected, "who's one violation from being revoked." That cracked something inside her. She spun toward the neighbors, shouting to anyone who'd listen. "He's tricking you. You're living in an illegal community. These houses are part of a fraud." Her ranting hit a different reaction this time. Not fear, but exhaustion. People had survived her regime once. They weren't going back. Then something unexpected happened. A new pickup pulled into the Valley Road. Dark blue. Clean. Plates from the next county. The man who stepped out wore a hooded jacket, clipboard in hand. Every instinct in me sharpened. Sarah muttered, "Well, well, there's our missing piece." The stranger walked straight to Bethany, leaned in, and whispered something. Her posture straightened instantly, as if someone had plugged her back into a power source. He handed her a manila envelope. She clutched it like a lifeline. Then he turned and walked away without acknowledging a single neighbor. Got back in his truck, drove off like nothing at all had transpired. Sarah crossed her arms. "So the consultant is real? Real enough to push her over the edge," I said. Bethany tore open the envelope, flipping through pages with frantic speed. Then she held one up in triumph. "Audit authority," she declared. "Section 8. I have the right to inspect any property under dispute." "Dispute?" I asked. She pointed at my barn. "Your structures, your parcels, and your tenants' homes fall under HOA authority until the investigation is complete." "What investigation?" I demanded. Bethany smiled, a fractured, victorious smile. "The one proving you illegally acquired HOA property that never should have been auctioned." The valley erupted in noise. Shouts, murmurs, disbelief, and then silence. Heavy, suffocating. Because we all knew what this meant. She wasn't randomly terrorizing people anymore. She had a plan, a direction, a target. Me. Sarah stepped closer to me. "Jake, if that envelope contains forged or altered dissolution documents, she has enough fuel to burn this valley to the ground, legally. And if she believes it," I said, "she'll run herself straight into another arrest." "She won't slow down this time," Sarah warned. "She'll escalate until someone stops her." We watched Bethany stride toward the next house, waving her authority like a torch, ready to ignite everything in reach. The valley held its breath. Not out of fear this time, but anticipation. The next move wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. Because if we didn't stop this cascade of forged documents and manipulated belief, the next chapter wouldn't be about harassment. It would be about a full-scale legal takeover. And Quiet Valley had already lived through one dictatorship. It wouldn't survive another. By Wednesday morning, every house seemed to know what was coming. There was a strange, vibrating tension hanging over the valley, like the land itself sensed that whatever Bethany had been building toward was about to detonate. I didn't have to wait long. At 1:42 p.m., a message hit every resident's phone simultaneously. Emergency HOA session. Mandatory attendance. Location, Valley Park. Conducted by President B. Crowell. Sarah read it twice, then slowly lowered her phone. "She didn't just cross the line," she said. "She bulldozed it." "She thinks she has authority again," I said. That envelope gave her enough fake legitimacy to go public. She wants a crowd, Sarah warned. She wants witnesses. She wants to reclaim the throne. Then we give her the crowd, I said, and the truth. By the time we reached the park, folding chairs had already been set out in 2 perfect rows. A plastic table sat up front, a battery-powered speaker system, a stack of documents spread like evidence bags. Bethany stood at the center, wearing a navy blazer like it was a uniform and gripping a microphone with white knuckles. The ankle monitor blinked red, but she ignored it. Neighbors gathered in clusters, some fearful, some furious, some simply exhausted. Davis approached me first. "Jake, is this legal?" "No," I said. "Is it dangerous?" "Yes." Sarah nudged me. "Eyes front." Bethany raised her microphone, voice amplified through cheap speakers. "Residents of Quiet Valley," she declared, "you have been deceived. A conspiracy has been executed to destroy your homeowner association, your protections, your rights, your property values." Muted murmurs rippled through the crowd. She held up a sheet, waving it overhead like a victory banner. "The dissolution of the HOA," her voice cracked with triumph, "was never legally finalized." Gasps, whispers, folks looking at one another with old fear. I stepped forward, projector case in hand. Sarah followed with a laptop. Bethany spotted us and grinned, manic and triumphant. "Ah," she said, "the conspirators arrive." If she thought that would intimidate me, she'd forgotten the last 3 years. "You mind if the Valley sees the rest of the story?" I asked calmly. "This is my session," she snapped. "No," I said. "This is the community's." Her jaw locked. She clutched her papers tighter. I opened the projector, set up the portable screen, and nodded at Sarah. "Show it." The first document illuminated the screen in bright white light, a legal filing from 4 years earlier. The HOA dissolution document, signed by the board, filed with the county, stamped complete. But the room didn't react yet, not until Sarah zoomed in on the signature line. Bethany's own name, her own hand, her own ink, projected 30 feet wide. The crowd inhaled sharply, a collective stunned breath. Bethany stared at it, eyes widening, pupils contracting like she was seeing a ghost wearing her handwriting. "No," she whispered. "No, that's forged." Sarah clicked to the next slide. An email from her former attorney advising dissolution to avoid personal liability. Then the next, board minutes confirming her vote. Then the next, county records validating the filing. Then the next, state certification. Each page layered atop the last, crushing the fantasy brick by brick. The truth wasn't a weapon. It was a collapse. Her collapse. By the 4th slide, her face had gone pale enough to match the screen. I stepped forward, voice steady. "Bethany, the HOA didn't die in some conspiracy. It died because you signed its death certificate." The crowd whispered, this time with outrage twisting into disbelief. "You killed your own regime," Sarah added. "You ended your own power." Bethany backed away from the table, trembling. "I was protecting the Valley. My attorney, they said it was temporary." Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean..." She caught herself, straightened her blazer, forced her voice louder even as it wavered. "This means nothing. The HOA still holds authority. You have all been misled." I clicked to the final slide. A public record of the HOA's corporate dissolution. Permanent. Irrevocable. Undeniable. Stamped in State Archive ink. Terminated. The crowd fell into absolute silence. Mrs. Patterson whispered, "She ended it. Herself." Hawkins let out a bitter laugh. "All that hell we lived through, she was already done, and didn't even know it." Bethany's microphone trembled in her hand. No, you don't understand. You were never supposed to. But her ankle monitor began shrieking. The sound cut through her words like a blade. Deputy Lawson appeared at the edge of the park, radio in hand. More units followed. Bethany whipped toward them in panic. No, you can't arrest me! I'm the president! Her shriek echoed across the trees. But nobody moved to help her. Nobody defended her. Nobody believed her. When Lawson approached, she stumbled backward, knocking over her table, papers scattering like feathers caught in a storm. I still have authority, she screamed. No, Lawson said, stepping forward slowly, deliberately. You don't. The crowd watched as Bethany froze between flight and collapse. You violated your release, Lawson continued, multiple times. And, Sarah added sharply, you misled this community under fabricated authority. I stepped forward, voice quiet so only she and the nearest few could hear. The HOA didn't fall today, I said. It fell 4 years ago. You just never accepted that the valley healed without you. Her eyes flickered. Rage, confusion, heartbreak. Then she lunged, straight for the projector. The monitor shrieked louder, flashing red. Before she could reach it, deputies closed in, guiding her down carefully but firmly. It wasn't violent. It wasn't dramatic. It was inevitable. The last image on the screen, the dissolution she had signed, glowed behind her like a tombstone. For her reign, for her delusion, for her power, Quiet Valley had outgrown her, and she was the last to know. As the deputies lifted her to her feet and led her toward the cruiser, the valley stood still, silent, watching a dictator realize she no longer had a kingdom. But the chapter wasn't closed. Not yet. Because while Bethany was the storm, someone else had been the wind pushing her, and that someone hadn't shown their face today. Not yet. But their fingerprints were all over the chaos. By the time deputies escorted Bethany out of the park, the crowd was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. People murmured about forged documents, missing affidavits, and that hooded consultant who appeared just long enough to hand Bethany the fuel she needed to burn the valley down. Sarah closed the laptop with a firm snap. We revealed her delusion, she said, but not the source. A neighbor whispered behind us, if she had a handler, he'll surface now that she's in custody. He already surfaced, I said. You just didn't see it. Because while everyone watched the meltdown, I watched the edges of the gathering, where a dark blue pickup had idled too long, engine humming like it was waiting for a signal. And the moment Bethany hit the dirt, that truck eased away. Cowardly quiet, purposefully timed, strategically invisible. Marcus Hale never liked being the face of conflict. He much preferred being the architect behind it. Later that evening, Sheriff Morales met us outside the small administrative building that once served as the HOA office, the same building Bethany tried to break into earlier in the week. He put his hands on his hips. You two created one hell of a public record today. Truth needed its day, Sarah said. It got more than that. Morales handed me a thin folder. Judge wants a full accounting of the valley's property interests. The courthouse is requesting documentation from the dissolution and every land transfer since. I flipped through the papers. It wasn't a request. It was a summons for verification, under oath. She's challenging the land transfers, Sarah said quietly. Morales nodded. Her new charges will stick either way. But whoever's behind her gave her just enough real legal terminology to force the court to review everything. So we verify, I said. Simple on paper, Morales replied. But you'll need to show every deed, every auction certificate, every transfer log. Sarah crossed her arms. We'll show more than that. Morales raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I answered for her. The parcels she thinks were stolen weren't stolen. They were sold at auction when the HOA dissolved. Legally? Morales asked. Legally, Sarah said. And Jake bought them. Morales blinked. How many? I took a breath. 18 homes, 5 easements, the office, the community barn, and all 3 former common areas. Silence. Then Morales let out a low whistle. Well, he muttered, that explains why she keeps screaming conspiracy. It also explains why someone like Marcus would want her believing the HOA still existed, I said. If the HOA were revived, even temporarily, those parcels could be challenged. Sarah tapped the folder. But only if someone could convince her to file actions she didn't understand. Morales squinted at me. You're saying Hale groomed her to be the aggressor while he stayed off the radar. He needed chaos, I said. Needed the valley caught up in doubt. Needed me tied up in hearings instead of defending the land. Sarah added, she was the perfect weapon. Distracted, unstable, and desperate for authority. Morales snapped the folder shut. Well, we're not giving that man a foothold. He pointed toward the building. Show me those deeds. Inside the old HOA office, dust curled off shelves as I unlocked a steel cabinet. Each drawer was filled with labeled binders, auction receipts, purchase confirmations, loan documents, verified property surveys. The paper trail wasn't pretty, but it was airtight. Sarah spread them across the old meeting table. Every document is time-stamped and notarized, she said. Every parcel transfer went through county review. Morales inspected the paperwork with a careful, methodical patience. Judge will want digital duplicates, certified ones. They exist, I said. 3 backups, 2 off-site. Sarah smirked. Jake doesn't lose paperwork. Not when it concerns land, I said, or a community that nearly died under her. Morales nodded approvingly. This is solid, stronger than anything that so-called consultant gave her. He paused, then leaned in. Jake, you realize the valley doesn't just have dissolved HOA land. He tapped the signature page of one of the larger parcels. You own majority stake of Quiet Valley. I didn't answer, because answering meant acknowledging something I never intended. Power. Not power like Bethany craved. Power to decide how the valley lived. Power to protect it. Power to rebuild it. Sarah's voice softened. This is why Marcus wants you out. If he revives the HOA, even fraudulently, he can challenge every transfer, block your ownership, or force a land reassessment. But he can't win, I said. Not legally, she agreed. But he doesn't need to win. He just needs to make the valley believe there's a chance. Morales cleared his throat. And after tonight, people will believe something is moving behind the scenes. He snapped the binder shut again. You need to get ahead of this, he said. Publicly, legally, before Hale makes his next move. Which will be what? I asked. Sarah answered. Discredit the dissolution documents. Then discredit your ownership. Then force an injunction. He'll do whatever it takes to stall you. And Bethany? I asked. She'll double down, Sarah said. She'll claim she was framed, manipulated, that the projector documents were fake. The more she spirals, the more Hale benefits. Morales sighed. Judge will want to see the entire picture. The projector evidence was good, but we need more. Sarah looked at me. Jake, it's time. I frowned. Time for what? For you to show the valley the full truth, she said. Not just that the HOA is dead, but who actually controls the land now. I hesitated, not because I doubted my paperwork, but because Quiet Valley had been abused by power before. I don't want them thinking I'm the new ruler, I said. You're not, Sarah replied. You're the shield, And shields don't get to stay hidden when arrows start flying. Morales added, and the only way to stop Hale is to show the valley the one thing he can't manipulate. Which is? Sarah opened a folder and pointed at a deed. You own the ground he wants. I closed my eyes for a moment, then nodded once. Tomorrow, I said. I'll show them everything. Sarah smiled faintly. Good, because Marcus won't stay in the dark much longer. And as the three of us stood in the dusty office lit only by a flickering fluorescent lamp, a chill threaded the air. Bethany was the storm. But Marcus Hale? He was the climate, and the valley was finally about to see him. Bethany's arrest at the park should have ended everything. Public meltdown, documented violations, ankle monitor screaming itself hoarse. Any normal parolee would have been back in a concrete cell before sunset. But Bethany Crowell was not normal, and Marcus Hale was not done with her. By sunrise the next morning, a rumor spread across Quiet Valley like dust through a cracked window. She's out again. Released pending hearing. She's saying she was set up. I wasn't surprised. Hale had always known how to twist the system just enough to stall consequences. A procedural delay here, a paperwork dispute there. Not to save her, no. To buy himself time. Sarah arrived before breakfast, hair still damp from a rushed shower, legal pad tucked under one arm. She's going to try something big today, she said. She won't accept the collapse at the park as her real ending. She doesn't think she ended anything, I replied. She thinks we faked the documents. And Hale wants her believing that, Sarah added, because he still needs her to keep pushing. I nodded. Then today's the day we expose him. But neither of us predicted just how far her desperation would go, or how fast it would unravel. Quiet Valley was calm that afternoon. A deceptive calm, the kind you get in the seconds before a storm rips the roof off. I was repairing a loose rail on my fence line when a panicked shout cut across the ridge. Jake! She's heading to your tenants! It was Davis, running full sprint. Before I could respond, another sound reached me. A shrill, escalating alarm. Her ankle monitor. She was in full violation again. I ran toward the lower road, and there she was. Bethany stood in the middle of the cul-de-sac, holding her microphone from the park like some twisted scepter. Papers spilled from her arms. Her hair had come loose from its tight bun, giving her a wild, frantic look. "You've all been lied to," she shrieked. "The dissolution was forged. The deeds are fake. You are all subjects of a fraudulent regime." Families backed into their homes. Kids were pulled inside. Doors slammed. But one person didn't retreat. Michael, the quiet tenant who'd moved here for peace, stepped out of his doorway with his lease in hand. "You need to leave," he said steadily. "This isn't your authority." His tone, calm but firm, seemed to shatter whatever fragile thread still held her mind together. Bethany lunged toward him, grabbing his lease and ripping it in half. "This is void," she screamed. "I rule this community! The alarm on her ankle monitor erupted. 3 sharp tones, parole emergency flag. Deputy Lawson's cruiser screeched into the cul-de-sac within seconds. But this time he wasn't alone. 2 unmarked sedans slid in behind him. Her parole officer stepped out, and right beside him, Sheriff Morales. Game over. "Bethany Crowell," Morales announced, voice steady, but carrying a finality that echoed across the valley. "You are in violation of supervised release, trespassing, harassment, and unlawful interference with residential contracts." Bethany stumbled backward, eyes wide. No, this is all his doing. His conspiracy." She pointed at me. But something else happened then, something Bethany never expected. All around the cul-de-sac, tenants stepped out. Davis, the Millers, the Hawthorns, Maria Santos, Patterson. Not one of them stood behind her. Every face, tired, angry, resolute, stood with me. "You terrorized us for years," Patterson said, voice trembling but fierce. "We won't go back." "You vandalized his barn," Miller added. "You forced your way into my house," Michael said. "You don't belong here anymore," Maria whispered. The last voice cracked something deep in Bethany. Her expression twisted, a mix of rage and disbelief, like the community she once controlled was committing betrayal. "This valley was mine," she snarled. "I built its order, Lawson moved faster than the words could leave her throat. He stepped behind her, guiding her arms gently but firmly. "This time," Morales said, "you're not coming back." Bethany fought, of course, kicking, screaming, going limp, then thrashing again. Her voice rose into an unhinged pitch. "He forged the deeds. He stole HOA property. You're all too blind to see. He's the criminal, not me." But her words didn't land, because someone else had tried to slip away unnoticed. A dark blue pickup, engine running, facing the exit of Quiet Valley. "Marcus," I said under my breath. Morales followed my gaze. "Hale?" he muttered. "That cowardly snake." But Marcus Hale didn't get far. A second sheriff's unit pulled across the road, blocking the exit. Officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts, not threatening, but unmistakably ready. Marcus froze, not arrested yet, but pinned, and he knew it. He slowly rolled his window down, gave a rehearsed half smile, and called out, "Afternoon, Sheriff. Just passing through." Morales didn't respond. He looked at me, then back at Bethany, who was still screaming my name like a curse. And in that moment, the whole valley understood the truth. She hadn't been the architect. She'd been the tool, a pawn sharpened by someone else's ambition. Marcus straightened his jacket, adjusting his composure, but his eyes flicked nervously between the deputies and me, calculating, measuring, planning his next escape route. He wouldn't get one. Not after tonight. Lawson secured Bethany in the cruiser. The last thing we heard before the door shut was her voice breaking into frantic, guttural sobs. The sound wasn't triumphant, or angry, or even defiant. It was empty. Like someone discovering that the kingdom they fought to reclaim never existed anymore. Morales exhaled, heavy and long. "She's done," he said. "Judge won't give her another inch. Not after this." "What about him?" I asked, nodding toward Marcus. Morales smiled, small, cold. "He's next." And as Bethany's cruiser rolled away under the weight of flashing lights, Quiet Valley finally stood in stillness. Not fear, not chaos, but the quiet before justice. The storm had ended. Now came the rebuilding, and for the first time, we'd do it without shadows steering the valley's fate. Bethany was gone before sunrise, transported to the county facility after her parole revocation hearing was expedited overnight. No delays, no appeals. The judge reviewed her violations, the public meltdown, the video evidence, and her attempted intimidation of residents. 8 minutes later, her fate was sealed. But the valley's wasn't, because the real question lingered in the dust of her departure. What now? With the HOA dead, its last president imprisoned, and Marcus Hale exposed as the puppeteer in the background, the valley needed direction, and not the kind that came from bylaws or fear, the kind that came from ownership, responsibility, choice. By mid-morning, Sarah had gathered the community in the same park where Bethany tried to resurrect her empire. No microphone, no rows of chairs, just neighbors standing in a loose semicircle around the picnic table while the wind pushed gently through the cottonwoods. Morales stood off to the side, arms folded, keeping watch but letting the valley lead itself. I placed a single binder on the table, thick, worn, full of papers the valley had never seen together at once. The deeds, all of them. 18 homes, 5 easements, former common areas, the old barn, the HOA office, utility parcels. Everything the HOA once controlled. I opened the cover. A murmur spread across the crowd. This is what Bethany thought she could take back, I said. What Marcus wanted to contest. What this valley nearly tore itself apart over once already. Patterson cleared her throat. You're telling us you own all of that? I do, I said plainly. Bought legally at auction after the dissolution. No tricks, no loopholes, no pressure. Just abandoned property the county needed someone to take responsibility for. Fear flickered in a few faces. Old instincts resurfacing. Instincts shaped by years of rule under someone who abused authority every day she held it. Davis asked the question they were all thinking. So, what does that mean now? For us? I didn't hesitate. It means this valley won't ever be controlled by an HOA again, I said. Not while I'm alive. Not while these deeds exist. A ripple. Relief. Disbelief. Gratitude. Sarah added, There's no mechanism to resurrect the HOA. Not legally. The state closed its corporate status permanently. All structures, rights, and authority tied to it are gone. Morales chimed in. Judge confirmed it this morning. Even Hale couldn't challenge the transfers, not with the records Jake provided. And Hale? Maria asked quietly. He's being investigated for interference with a supervised felon, Morales said, and for attempting to influence property claims through fraud. He won't be back. For the first time in years, the valley exhaled. A real exhale. Not fear, not tension. Relief. After the meeting, we moved to the old HOA office, now legally mine but symbolically ours. We tore the faded HOA sign off the wall. The metal clattered onto the concrete like something exercised. Patterson laughed, a cracked, emotional laugh that carried years of release. Should have done that a decade ago, she said. The Millers replaced it with a simple wooden plaque carved by hand. Quiet Valley. Independent. Since 2024, community by choice, not control. The words weren't mine. They came from a valley that finally got to define itself. Over the next week, the transformation was visible everywhere. People repainted mailboxes whatever color made them happy. Gardens flourished in wild, beautiful shapes free from regulation. Kids rode bikes without their parents flinching at the sound of a clipboard. Neighbors talked openly across fences without whispering. Quiet Valley didn't become lawless. It became free. And free communities naturally build something better than rules ever could. Trust. We agreed on simpler guidelines. Trash schedules, quiet hours, emergency contacts. Nothing enforced through fear. Just common sense and conversation. Sarah worked with the county to formally register Quiet Valley as a standard residential district. No board, no authority figures, no fines, no bylaws. Just people. One evening, after a long day repairing the barn and removing the last of the sprayed paint, I stood at my gate as the sun dipped low over the ridge. Dust curled across the road in golden spirals, catching the light like the valley itself was glowing. I leaned on the rail, letting the quiet settle. Not the quiet of fear, the quiet of peace. Sarah walked up beside me, hands in her pockets. You did it, she said. We all did, I replied. No, she said gently. You protected them. You kept the valley alive when the HOA fell apart. And when Bethany came back, you were the shield that kept history from repeating. I shook my head. I didn't fight for power. I fought for peace. That's why you won, she said. A softness filled her voice. And why they trust you. Up the road, neighbors were laughing as they planted flowers near the entrance sign. Kids chased each other with sticks. Someone hammered in a new fence post. It was the sound of a valley rebuilding, not from scratch, but from relief. I glanced at Sarah. Think they'll be all right? She smiled. They already are. I turned back toward the gate. The old wood gleamed warm in the fading sunlight. The valley stretched wide and quiet, peaceful. And for the first time, I felt something settle inside me, a realization that justice wasn't always loud. It didn't always look like a courtroom or a confrontation. Sometimes justice was simply quiet. Quiet like land resting after a storm. Quiet like people finally breathing. Quiet like a valley choosing its future without fear. I whispered to myself, barely audible in the breeze. Some people never learn the land doesn't bow to power, only to truth. And Quiet Valley, free, whole, and finally at peace, was all the proof I needed. If you felt that justice landed where it should, drop a yes in the comments. And if you've ever stood your ground against the wrong kind of authority, type justice so I know you're out there. Stick around and hit subscribe. There's a lot more land, grit, and truth to come.